Hey, welcome back everyone to my world of stocks. In today's video, we'll be diving into 5 reasons why investors are rushing back into NIO stock. I'm going to break it all down for this Chinese EV company. And because I own a little bit of the stock myself, I'll give you my own opinion on everything too. So it should be a ton of fun. I hope you enjoy this update. Let's go ahead and dive straight into it. All right, now, before we dive into the 5 reasons, let me just quickly show you the stock price for some context here. And by the way, this was likely also a reason for why investors are jumping in, because the stock has been heavily beaten down up until recently, where it now bounced back up by over 13% this past week, and it's also up over 33% in the past quarter too. However, even after this recent rise, NIO stock is still down over 90% from the top. So perhaps a little bit of a short squeeze happening here too, as investors are now buying the dip. By the way, I'll just get this out of the way now. My personal history with this stock is that I was a buyer before that huge run up that we had towards the end of 2020, where I completely sold out of it and made a ton of profit. This is all documented on the channel. You can see this in past videos. But then more recently, when it crashed by a huge amount, that's when I decided to now start buying in a little bit on this dip. Now it's only around 1% of my entire portfolio at the moment, so it's very insignificant, but I just kind of treat this as a very interesting spec stock that I want to hold on to long term and be buying in small pieces while it is down a lot, and then see how it performs many years from now. But hey, so far in recent months, I've actually been liking a lot of what I see from NIO, which brings us to reason number 1 why I think investors are buying the stock, and that is their new, cheaper sub-brand called Onvo, which is targeted more towards the mass market with much more affordable EVs. And I just can't overstate how important of a deal this is for the company, because by tapping into those lower price ranges, well, it's going to greatly expand their customer base that NIO can now market to. And it also helps them compete more directly with not just other EV companies on price, but also with traditional ICE vehicles that tend to be a lot cheaper as well, which is even more important in today's economy that is pretty weak all around the world, coming off of the pandemic with inflation and high interest rates and everything else going on. In fact, price is something that has historically and especially recently weighed pretty heavily on Tesla for some time now too. And we all know how long we've been hearing and really waiting for them to release a cheaper mass market vehicle. Well, NIO looks to be already doing that with the new L60 model, starting at just around $21,000 if you include the battery swap service. Now, obviously, these aren't going to be the same kind of flagship level EVs that you would typically get from the more expensive NIO brand, but the whole point here is to just be able to offer multiple options at multiple different price points for all possible consumers on any budget, right? And that's exactly what NIO is doing here with Onvo. Now, for comparison, I think the cheapest Tesla you could get right now is around $40,000 or more in America. So there's a pretty big gap there on price. Now, obviously, it's going to take some time for that cheaper brand to expand globally. I think right now it's only even been available for like a month, and most sales will still happen in China and Europe for now, but that should be fine, at least for the moment, as those are really still the 2 biggest markets for EVs in the world. And by the way, China just recently broke EV penetration of more than 50% for the first time in history. Now you contrast that with America, which is still in the single digits, and that's a big difference there. So China, very good market to be, selling EVs, but also in Europe too, you want to be taking advantage of that, and you also want to slowly expand internationally, globally, as much as you can. And anyway, all of this has really been helping NIO's numbers now too, which is reason number 2, that they're having a big recovery in their delivery numbers, because for a while there, NIO was actually going through a bit of a rough patch in terms of growing their sales, but more recently their delivery numbers have actually rebounded to now posting 5 consecutive months of over 20,000 deliveries, which there was only one other single month, I believe, in their history where they had done numbers like that. And altogether for the third quarter, deliveries also broke a new record high too, with double-digit year-over-year growth. So it's a very big deal. Now, like I said, the Onvo brand, it just recently launched, which you can see on this chart here how tiny of a percent that makes up. But that was with only about 10 days of deliveries, which always starts very limited before ramping up with any new model, let alone, an entirely new brand like this. So the good news is that NIO was already doing much better. It is doing much better. They're already recovering. And moving forward, they're also going to get a big boost here from that cheaper sub brand too that can target more customers at different price points, which could slowly snowball into better performance for the company as a whole. And yeah, that's exactly why more analysts are actually coming out now bullish on the stock, which is reason number 3, where we've had recent upgrades from Morgan Stanley, Deutsche Bank, and more, who are not only citing new Chinese economic stimulus, but also more company-specific details like NIO's stronger deliveries, increased production, the new cheaper sub-brand, and their innovative technologies like battery swap, helping NIO differentiate themselves, compete more on price, build up their brand strength, and ultimately expand in market share. Plus, one more thing they note, a recent cash infusion of close to $500 million from strategic investors in China. That's reason number 4, because what this does is it not only strengthens NIO's balance sheet, but it's also going to help them fund the growth of Onvo, any upcoming vehicle launches, help them scale production, and even their battery swap network too, help them expand across Europe and even parts of the Middle East. And overall, it's also just a good sign of really increased confidence from influential players with a lot of money, which is money and backing really that NIO is going to need for them to continue expanding and investing in research and development and growth initiatives. Speaking of which, that brings us to reason number 5, and that is Firefly. Because believe it or not, guys, NIO is actually planning to launch yet another sub-brand, except this one will be even cheaper than Onvo. It's being called an ultra-affordable brand, and it's codenamed Firefly, and it's set to be unveiled as early as the end of this year on NIO Day at the end of December, with plans to launch models for as low as, get this guys, around $14,000. That is insanely cheap. Now, obviously, those would very likely be on a battery swap service plan too, but a lot of people actually like those plans anyway. I think it's like around $100 a month, and you never have to worry about your battery getting old or degrading, and you don't have to wait for long times at chargers. You just swap the battery in under 5 minutes and you hit the road. But if you want to, you can always just buy the battery out too. It's going to make the vehicle a little more expensive for that, but it's still going to be cheaper than Teslas anyways at these price points. So I just think all around NIO is making the right moves here. I do think there is significant risk from 2 specific areas though. One is in market saturation. I do think there's a lot of rising competition in the EV space. And reason number 2 would be tariffs. Many countries are putting tariffs on imported EVs from China because really if they don't, then they would likely just take over the entire market. But that also just shows that what they're doing is working. And I don't know, as a speculative stock, acknowledging the risk, I still like to have a small piece of NIO in my portfolio just in case for the long term, and we'll see what happens with it. But by the way, I do have much larger positions in Tesla. It's one of my biggest stocks, and then I also have a little bit of GM stock too that I consider both of those to be relatively safer options, right? And so NIO is just that tiny spec play for me. If I'm gonna have some spec stocks, a couple here or there, I think NIO is an interesting one. It's okay to have a little piece of it and see how it does long term. But hey, that's my opinion, guys. What do you all think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you own any NIO stock? Are you invested in it? Have you thought about it? Or is it something you wouldn't touch? I totally get it. It's a Chinese stock, inherently carries a lot of risk just for being a Chinese stock. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down there in the comment section. And hey, thanks for stopping by, my friends. Hope you enjoyed this quick update on NIO. And I will catch you in the next video. All right, take care, everybody. Bye-bye.